Well, it's here, my dudes, the inevitable Mario Kart video that anyone who knows me knows was coming at some point. I was always going to talk about Mario eventually, and Mario Kart is just so easy to talk about, but also I'm not even sure how I'd introduce a video like this. I love Mario Kart, you love Mario Kart, everyone loves Mario Kart. If you're like me and are someone who always brings the Nintendo Switch to the function, you know that it doesn't matter if a fellow attendee is 15 drinks deep or is a cop called over to shut down the party for noise complaints, you whip that Switch out and offer up a few games of Mario Kart and everyone's gonna have a great time and you're gonna be the most popular person there. And I'm sure many of you have that friend who's recently approached you like, hey guys, I got the new Mario Kart DLC that has a bunch of new tracks, you want a race? Wanna race? Race? Please? So what if it's just me? Whatever, y'all are boring. So we all love Mario Kart, but especially Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, one of the best games in the series with a godlike selection of tracks and the mechanics of Mario Kart refined and distilled down to a science. There's just one big problem here. We've been playing the same Mario Kart game for a goddamn decade now. Yeah, the original Mario Kart 8 for Wii U came out all the way back in 2014, and apart from the odd DLC and update and revamp version for Switch, we've been stuck with this one game for all that time, so a massive DLC was kind of inevitable really if we weren't getting a sequel, but I doubt that anyone expected it to be done in the way that it was, despite it also oddly making perfect sense. So you may have heard of or have even played Mario Kart Tour. My condolences. A weird and honestly kind of bad Mario Kart game released for phones, full of gacha mechanics and empty, hollow feeling gameplay with this whole world tour gimmick that brings back some classic tracks, while also having a load of tracks based on cities in the real world. So Nintendo had all these classic fan favourite tracks remade for a Mario Kart game that barely anyone liked, along with a bunch of original tracks they made for it, and a Mario Kart game that was very well liked, but had been the one Mario Kart game that we'd all been stuck with that was virtually unchanged for years, and you can probably see where this is going. Also, don't come at me with Mario Kart Live Home Circuit, okay? If you have the shitload of open, uncarpeted floor space to be able to play this thing to its full potential, then fuck you, man. I would have killed for this shit as a kid. So, Nintendo announced the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass DLC. 6 waves released over the span of a year or so, each with 2 new cups of courses to play, and sometimes other features such as new playable characters. Sounds like a godsend, and don't get me wrong, it totally is, but it also loses some of its magic when you remember that they're all ported over directly from Mario Kart Tour. Now this isn't inherently bad, it just means that for one, all these tour tracks look a lot worse than those from the base game. They look better on the Switch, but it's still very obvious to tell that these were tracks made for a phone game rather than the base game whose tracks were clearly made for a console with pretty graphics. Or pretty at the time of the Wii U, I guess. Also, the fact that because of Tour's whole gimmick, these waves are all going to include at least 1 or 2 of the tracks from Tour based on real cities like London Loop, Paris Promenade, New York Minute, Tokyo Blur, etc. I can't wait for the Birmingham track that's impossible to survive because Mario and co just get bum rushed by roadmen and the guy who stole Tom Cruise's car. I'm surprised they made it out of the UK the last time they visited, to be honest. So a decent amount of each of these waves heavily hinges on what you think of these city tracks, and me personally, well, we'll get into that soon. Either way, a load of new tracks being added to the game was always going to be very welcome, because as good as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is, it was undeniable we were all in dire need of either a new proper Mario Kart game, or a massive DLC like this. And hey, I'm a blind Nintendo fan. I was around in the Mario Kart 8 on Wii U days when we first got that DLC. They gave us those 4 extra cups and all the Zelda, Splatoon and Animal Crossing themed bits, but this is such a different beast to that. And all you fuckers who started with 8 Deluxe who got that DLC included in the game don't know how lucky you have it, okay? This was all we had. So, I thought it would be fun to go through each wave of the Booster Pass and review each one, based on how much I like the tracks included and the other features they added. Now, there's a lot of ways to approach that. If you're a professional Mario Kart sweat, you're going to be looking at how good these tracks are for sweating, like how good the layout is, shortcuts, stuff like that. If you're more of a casual player, it will be stuff like generally how fun it is, how pretty it looks, and for me, a sad Mario/Mario Kart nerd, it will be a solid mix. How fun the track is to race on, how good a choice it was to bring back, how good a version it is compared to its original if it's a retro track, etc. And I think I've rambled on long enough, so let's go and start right at the beginning with Wave 1. So we're kicking off with Wave 1. No duh. which gave us the Golden Dash and Lucky Cat Cups, and starting off with track 1 of the Golden Dash Cup, Tour Paris Promenade, the first of the Mario Kart Tour city tracks. Now this was definitely an interesting one to start with because it really sets the tone for what to expect of the city tracks, especially if you aren't used to playing them in Tour. We have a jovial ride through the streets of Paris and even a little rendezvous with landmarks such as l'Arc de Triomphe and the Eiffel Tower. And it automatically goes at the bottom of the list for forcing me to set foot in France, but on the whole, it's okay. Yeah, you're gonna notice a common theme with a lot of these city tracks from Tour. They're fine enough, but they just really don't do it for me, and this is probably one of the most vanilla of the bunch. Visually, it's probably one of the nicest ones here. It's very pretty, but even then it looks very samey a lot of the time with just the same visual aesthetic and types of buildings throughout. Like, it's a very orangey, beige-ish track, and there's not a whole lot to say in terms of the track itself either. There's a lot of satisfying turns to make throughout the track that are fun to pull off and try to maximize your drifts, though that's something you'd be able to give to any good track in this game. And it does this new thing that Tour introduced, tracks with laps, but the route changes between laps via these holographic signposts that point you where to go. Mario Kart 7 introduced long tracks with sections rather than laps, Tour introduced these lap tracks where the route changes, and now they're in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and honestly it is a great addition. It really helps add a little bit more flavour to tracks like these. But even then, the track only really does this on the final lap, which does make for a nice surprise to go the same route the first 2 laps and then be racing against others going back the way you came on the final lap, but that's easy to get used to. On the whole, that's all I can really give this track. Good visuals, a lot of satisfying turns, and a surprise shake-up on the final lap, but that's it. It's really nothing special, and I'm not going to have a lot more to say than that for a lot of these city tracks. Next is 3DS Toad Circuit. Wow, Toad Circuit, really? I know the selection for the Booster Course Pass is heavily dependent on what's already in Tour, which I haven't played since it was relatively new, so I don't know what legacy tracks are available to pull from, but this choice is memed on for a reason. Toad Circuit is easily one of the weakest circuit tracks out there, bar the simple flat ones from Super Mario Kart and Mario Kart Super Circuit. No interesting features going for it at all, bar these creepy-ass toad balloons, I guess. Really boring and uninteresting layout that's also really short and feels like it's over after like 5 seconds, and that is literally it. It's like the Mario Kart equivalent of when you're hanging out with friends and they all want to stop off at McDonald's, but you're not that hungry, so you just pick up a regular fries so you aren't the only one not eating. Like, congrats, man. What did you accomplish here? Not to mention, again, I don't know which ones Tour has to pull from, but there are so many more interesting circuit tracks to use. Wii Mario Circuit is one of my favourite ones ever. It's a real banger, as is Double Dash Mario Circuit. Hell, even Wii Luigi Circuit would be a more interesting pick, but nah, we got this one instead. Cool. It's not an awful track, none of these are really, it's just a really lame choice. Third on the list is N64 Choco Mountain, and whew, finally, now you're speaking my language. This is easily the best addition and best remake so far, a phrase I'm sure you're going to hear me repeat a lot as we go through. While still not looking great compared to the tracks in the base game, it's a visual upgrade to the older versions of this track in every way, with the interior of this cave looking especially pretty and interesting. The gameplay style of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe translates to this track seamlessly, with it being so damn satisfying to pull off long drifts in areas such as the infamous ledge with the falling boulders that we all fell off as kids at least once, and being in just the right spot to avoid the boulders and still maximizing that drift. And speaking of the ridge that we all fell off at least once, I love that near the end of it the double item box is right up against the edge just to bait you. Now that is a nice touch. This was a track that didn't have too much change about it because it didn't really need to, although any changes there have only served to make the track more dynamic, such as a glider section before the aforementioned ridge. Great addition to this wave, gonna find myself replaying it with friends a lot. And speaking of one I'm going to be replaying with friends a lot, one of my absolute favourite tracks of all time, and one of the most nostalgic ones for me, having grown up with Mario Kart Wii, Coconut Mall made it in, baby! This was one that simply had to be in the DLC. There are a good few classic tracks that just simply had to be in this thing, and Coconut Mall is absolutely one of them. Barely anything was changed, and it didn't have to be, as it's already pitch perfect and iconic for a reason. There are definitely some differences from the original. For example, I'm not a fan of the fact that we've kept the change the Mario Kart 7 version added, with the arrows on the escalators showing from afar which way they go. Part of the fun of the original was the potential to fuck up and go up the wrong escalator, significantly slowing you down, but that's a minor little thing that I can live with. I actually really like how the movement of the cars in the parking lot has been altered. Rather than simply sliding back and forth, they're skidded and slip sliding all over the place, which really adds to the chaotic vibe of this course. There's not much else to say really, this track is just goated, and it's a joy to have it playable in MK8 Deluxe, plus the music still slaps, but also the loss of the Miis around the mall and in the cars is still a tragedy. But yeah, the Golden Dash Cup is a decent start. 2 tracks I'm very lukewarm on and not super likely to pick up when playing with friends, but 2 fantastic tracks that I could play again and again. As for whether or not the second wave in this cup, the Lucky Cat Cup, will keep or improve on this 50% batting average, well, let's find out now. Starting this cup with Tour Tokyo Blur, another city track. I mean, it automatically gets more points for taking me to Japan rather than France, so... Again, I'm not going to shy away from how most of these city tracks just do nothing for me, and the more like this we get, the less I'm going to have to say other than for the ones that really surprise me. But Tokyo Blur is a solid step up from Paris Promenade. For starters, this one is far more visually interesting. Rather than just the same looking streets throughout most of it, there's always new and different things to look at throughout this course, helping it feel much more varied. Same with the actual track design too. Not only does this one twist and turn all over the place with a frantic pace, but this one actually changes routes between laps rather than just for the last one, taking advantage of its much more dynamic design and consistently unique visuals. It's still pretty average feeling on the whole though, and not one I'm super eager to replay again and again. If Paris Promenade was say like a 5 out of 10, then this one would probably be like a 6.5. Missed a trick with the name Tokyo Blur though. Like, Tokyo Drift is right there. Second up is DS Shroom Ridge, and I'm always down for Mario Kart DS's great course selection to get a visual upgrade, but this one's interesting because Shroom Ridge is not one I would have gone for. It wasn't bad or lame in the original or anything, it was just kind of whatever, and there were a lot more tracks that stuck out. However, I don't know how or why, but this version is super fun, and so much more so than the original somehow. I really enjoy this one. There haven't been any changes at all really, but it feels so much more dynamic and hectic than the original. I don't think there are more cars on the road this time around, even if I kind of wonder if there is. But I think with MK8 Deluxe's drift system, it feels so much cooler and satisfying to pull off perfect drifts and turns in just the right way to still weave in and out of all the cars, and drift around tight corners where you can't see what's coming, and still turn out okay to get that big speed boost from it. It also benefits from the track not having been widened out, at least not too much I don't think, unlike Toad's Turnpike was in the base game. So the cars are still very much a hazard, but they're complemented beautifully by how this Mario Kart plays. Plus features from Toad's Turnpike in the base game did make it in that enhance it, such as the surfboard cars that you can trick off.
You missed!
I said the surfboard cars that you can trick off. God damn it. But yeah, I love this track, which really surprised me. Did not expect that at all. And now we're on to one that's kind of a Bowser in the room, that being this version of GBA Sky Garden. Now I say that because, as you've probably seen people saying a lot, this is very much not the same track as the original. It's more one that's just vaguely similar and only really the same in name. Now that's not a bad thing in and of itself. Both Ribbon Road and Cheeseland got big overhauls in the first round of DLC all the way back on the Wii U that were included in the base game of 8 Deluxe, and these are incredible tracks. In fact, Mario Kart 8's version of GBA Ribbon Road is one of my favourite Mario Kart tracks of all time. But the thing is, those still feel like massive upgrades for the original tracks. They still evoke the tracks they were based on and still feel faithful. This one doesn't really feel all that faithful and doesn't feel like the original track but upgraded. It feels like something vaguely similar that's loosely based on the original. I can cast my mind back to certain segments of the Super Circuit original and the DS remake that are burned into my memory from when I played them before, and going through this track, those parts just feel absent. In fact, a lot of the presence of the original track feels absent here. Now, this isn't necessarily bad. It's still a fun track to race on and wouldn't be my very last pick from the tracks we've discussed so far, but it's hard to not feel a little disappointed by the fact that we've got Sky Garden back, but also not really. Instead, getting what feels like an early design of Cloudtop Cruise from the base game. The music still goes hard though. And we're rounding off Wave 1 with an original track, except not really, because these ones are actually from Tour, but for some reason they don't say Tour on the selection menu. It's a whole thing. Whatever. Annoying naming aside, Ninja Hideaway fucking slaps so goddamn hard. It is fantastic to race on and is also easily one of the most visually stunning tracks in the entire DLC, which makes it more annoying that some of these tracks look so crummy, but I digress. Ninja Hideaway is awesome. You'll probably notice from my gameplay on screen that in lap 1 I'm fucking up a lot. I hadn't played it in a while and the layout of this thing can be really fucking confusing, but not in a bad way, not because it's badly designed, but because there are a lot of alternate paths in this thing, and it can be hard to tell where you're going next up ahead because this is a track you've really got to learn, and then once you do, it's one of the coolest thrill rides in the entire game. Alternate paths galore with tight-knit turns and a lot of action that gets you up close and personal with other racers. It makes for a very fun time. Plus, this thing is full of neat visual details that you'll notice more and more with each race. I love these ninja shy guys that pop up and face you down near the end. But yeah, this one can be hard to pin down at first, but once you do, it's absolutely outstanding. Top tier addition to the roster. And that's Wave 1, a pretty decent start. It's not without its duds, but luckily there's none that I'd call outright stinkers. At worst, we've been given some ones that are just pretty mid, but at best we've got some absolute classics here. It's just a shame that these waves are going to be so bogged down by the city tracks though. Again, none of them are bad, but so many of them are just going to be mid and take up a slot that could have been taken by any better retro track. I know Tour will have plenty of those to offer, and there's still plenty from older Mario Karts that are awesome tracks but haven't been remade at all yet. We'll see what the following waves have to offer. If this is a sign of things to come, then as much as I'm not super excited for the city tracks, they usually only take one slot per cup, and a good amount of the returns have been great. Here's a little ranking of the tracks from Wave 1 for you. Lovely little best to worst / tier list thingamadoodah for you. And with that, it's Wave 2 time, baby. Wave 2 is in, boys. Just another couple of cups this time, starting off with the Turnip Cup, leading the charge with Tour New York Minute. I'm beginning to see a pattern here. Well, it's still a city track. It doesn't do anything all that exciting, bar changing routes between laps as usual, but this is probably the best city track so far for a couple of reasons. For one, the vast majority of this track is quite narrow, meaning that you're going to get absolutely ass-blasted with items unless you can get decently far ahead pretty quickly. Why did I pronounce it like that? Ass-blasted? Arse-blasted? No matter how I say it, it doesn't sound right. And the second reason, which is far more personal to me, is that it plays into vibes that I really like personally. For one, I'm just a sucker for urban city environments at night. I love being in the big city when it gets dark and all the lights come on and everything. It's just really beautiful to me. It's a hell of a vibe. Like, that's when cities really come to life. And I've already been to New York a couple of times, so seeing that portrayed in Mario Kart was always going to be a treat, especially seeing all the screens of Times Square being decorated with Mario-related visuals. That's a really neat touch. And I'm also a sucker for the old style of jazz big band music that New York is known for, which the soundtrack of this course absolutely nails the vibes of. So yeah, it just barely edges out ahead of the previous city tracks for me, purely based on being slightly more of a challenge due to the narrower track, and because I dig the vibes. That's literally it. Moving on, and it's SNES Mario Circuit 3. Great. Look, you don't need to yell at me in the comments. I know what we get, and its presentation entirely hinges on how it was in Tour, and that was a mobile game, so of course the presentation is going to be simplistic, but I don't care. I think we need to impose a rule on Nintendo that whenever they're going to bring back these flat tracks from Super Mario Kart or Mario Kart Super Circuit, they either give them the Ribbon Road / Cheeseland treatment, or they don't bring them back at all. And look, I actually really enjoyed this track in the retro selection of Mario Kart Wii, but that got away with it a bit more because of the graphical limitations of the Wii. But after seeing what was done with Donut Plains 3 in the base game and the graphical glow-up it got, this isn't just lacking. It looks ugly. As for the track itself, I honestly think there's something to be said for small simple tracks like this. They can be chaotic as the action is very close quarters. And this is probably one of the better of these kinds of tracks, as it's very heavy on the twists and turns. They actually complement Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's mechanics very well, so it's not bad, it's still fun, it's not the worst, not at all. But of all the tracks to return, this? Really? Like, honestly, if it was an option, SNES Mario Circuit 4 with its even crazier turns and narrower stretches could have been even better. But instead, we got 3 again. Oh well, it's still fun, just kind of a frustrating choice. I'm also beginning to notice another pattern, that being that these cups start out kinda lame in their first 2 tracks and then really pull it forward with the last 2, because we have got one hell of a double whammy here. Before I get too ahead of myself, N64 Calamari Desert was already really damn good and beloved for being such a simple track. You got a trek through the desert inspired by the American West and a few ramps to spice things up. Doesn't sound like much if it weren't for the train. The train that goes directly across the track with a functioning train crossing, meaning you either have to stop and wait for the train to pass or risk speeding ahead of it before you miss your chance. Already a genius idea for a track, but then what's this? The holographic arrows from Tor that indicate the route's gonna change? This track's from Mario Kart 64, you're not supposed to be here. Where would the route even change to? I mean, I know there's the rail that the train goes down and the tunnel it goes into, but we all tried to drive along the rail and into the tunnel when we played this as kids. Everyone knows you can't... Wait, no. No way. You didn't, Nintendo. You didn't. Oh, yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. This shit right here was an incredible choice, a stroke of genius. Taking an already iconic track and using the new mechanics to take what was iconic about it, that thing we all tried to do as kids, and actually make it part of the race. I can't express how much I love this. Actually, being made to drive on the train tracks with the train coming straight towards you adds so much to this track. I love having to go head on towards the train and then thread the needle alongside it and try not to lose speed or accidentally bump into it and fall behind. It's so fun, absolutely phenomenal remake of this track, wonderful addition. Oh, and you know how I said these cups start so meh with their first couple of tracks and then end with straight bangers? Well, what if just to finish this cup off, they threw in arguably the greatest Mario Kart track of all time. What more can be said about DS Waluigi Pinball? I mean, it's literally perfect. It's yet another track where no changes were made because, well, why would they? I remember when this dropped, I was hearing that some people weren't big fans of the slight visual overhaul that this track got, but honestly, I love it. This thing's gorgeous. Out with the kinda ugly Waluigi statue with the original, and in with the cartoony Super Mario Bros. 3 art style Waluigi with his head rocking back and forth like a fairground attraction. Plus the lighting, the colours, it's beautiful. Literally the only way it could be better was if it was on the same graphical level as the base game, having not been a port from Tor, but this thing looks so nice anyway that I don't even care. The track design is still superb, the turns are still wonderfully satisfying to pull off, especially with this game's drift mechanics. The pinballs rushing down the same track as you still feels just as tense and treacherous, yet exciting at the same time. Along with when you're driving through the pinball machine itself, trying to get ahead whilst taking care to avoid the bumpers that can knock you around or launch a stray pinball straight at your face if you're at the wrong place at the wrong time. There's nothing much else to say. The sky is blue, Waluigi Pinball is a great track. That's all there is to it. It will be very curious to see if the following cup of Wave 2, the Propeller Cup, will be anywhere near as much of a fucking roller coaster as the Turnip Cup. Because the first two tracks of the Turnip Cup had me like,
I mean, it's alright, like...
And the final two tracks had me like,
I beat the fuck out of my dick so goddamn hard.
So, let's see what you can do, Propeller Cup. Well, for starters, can you take a guess what kind of track is first? What? A city track from Tor? Don't be preposterous. Oh, maybe it's just me getting kind of sick of these and it'd be different if they were in another order, but Sydney Sprint might be my least favourite Tor track so far. I'm sorry, Aussies, but it just doesn't do anything all that interesting. It just feels dull and generic and vanilla again. It doesn't even have the luxury of a narrow track to cause some chaos like in New York Minute. This is a wide boy, so it's just a breeze to go through and not in a good way. I mean, I like this one section with all these ramps one after another. It's fun to chain doing tricks off them to maximize the speed boost, and I like the moments of going in or around Sydney Opera House, but they all last like 2 seconds, so not exactly riveting. Just another mid-tour track showing me that if they all swapped layouts, they'd all be and feel exactly the same. Also, the music is dope, but I like how it just sounds like any generic backing music for a track, like they had no clue how to theme it around Australia. Like, you could have thrown in a didgeridoo at least. Ah well. Next, GBA Snowland? I mean, I'm all for universally disliked tracks getting another shot in the limelight with improvements, and the god-awful shaking from the original is gone, which is a plus, but like, it just has the same problems as the other old flat tracks we've had so far. It's just boring and uninteresting. There's some decent minor additions, like some shortcuts you can access if you have a mushroom at the right time. I wasn't able to in this footage. And I like the lines of item boxes that glide down the track and sort of swoop in from above. Like, that's cute, but it's just dressing. You've made no cake, but still put on icing. Probably not the best analogy, since icing is the best part of any cake anyway. Come on, I'm right. You know I'm right. I'd even appreciate the addition of the track being slippery, since it's an ice-themed one, but no, it's not even that, or at least if the track is slippery, then it's so subtle that I've never noticed it. Just lame, but guess what? The cup does indeed pick up in its second half. Because, whoo baby, this is my mushroom jam. Wii Mushroom Gorge is another Waluigi pinball for me. It's another timeless classic where nothing was changed because it just didn't need to be. I may be biased because it's my favourite track from my childhood Mario Kart, but it is just a 10 out of 10 banger and you all know it. The journey up to the cave bouncing off of the mushrooms on the way is still a great thrill ride, and the cave itself bouncing off all those shroom boys will never not be fun as fuck. Also, you won't often hear me speak super well about certain things Mario Kart 7 did, but I'm glad we actually kept that one blue mushroom that brings out your glider from that game's version. That's defo a welcome change. There's not much else to say. This shit slaps and you all know it, and any Mario Kart Wii vet knows you can't have your coconut more without a healthy dose of Mushroom Gorge to boot, and or vice versa. And we round off the Propeller Cup and Wave 2 with another not so original track. I originally thought it was original, but it actually originally originates from Tour. But whatever, Sky High Sunday. It's no Ninja Hideaway, but it's good. It has this actually quite unique gimmick, where even when you are racing upright, it's in anti-gravity the whole time, so the whole thing feels very floaty, which I can appreciate how different it makes the experience feel. The track design is also very well done here, but also, I don't know, despite all this, it just doesn't jump out at me as much as some of the other offerings here do. It also has this weird quirk, where it has all these barriers, but you can literally just phase through them, and they act as those spinning bollard things you can bump into while in anti-gravity to get a speed boost. It just looks really goofy and cheap and feels lazy. Why not just get rid of the barriers and use those bollard things? But whatever, it's still a fun track to play on, very solid addition. And that's Wave 2. It's defo good, but very inconsistent in quality. There's some real great stuff here, but also some really mid-ass shit. But I'm not going to complain too much, because we've got some great additions that I wouldn't want this DLC to go without. So gonna chuck another fancy schmancy ranking of these tracks up on screen for you to have a little look at. Just let you soak it on in there. And that'll do it. It's Wave 3 time. So, Wave 3, and before we take a look at the tracks themselves, Wave 3 also brought along with it an interesting new feature. So if you have the Booster Course Pass, when you go onto Versus mode and set the game up, you can now set the items to custom. And doing this, you'll next come to this screen where you can customize which items are in game by turning certain ones off, even setting the selection to random to really shake things up. Now, when I first heard about this and saw this, I thought this was an awesome feature. I remember thinking, God, imagine if you could turn off the super basic items you get at the top of first place, such as shells, bananas, and coins, and have a more random chance of getting some of the more powerful items that would normally be reserved for lower places. I remember thinking this could make games so much more bombastic and tense and lead to some crazy action, but it's a little more complicated than that. So I'm making this long after Wave 3's already been out, and obviously when it first came out I tried this function, and I wanted to make it so I could be getting some crazy items up in first. And basically, in very simplified terms, just as much for my benefit as yours, because I haven't exactly read up on this, it's just from observation of how the items in Mario Kart work, at least in 8 Deluxe, is that each position from 1st to 12th place has set items that appear when you're in those places. Some items appearing when you're in a range of places, for example the star appearing when you're in the bottom few positions, and things like single bananas, shells, and coins and stuff like that being the only things you can get when in first. Well, bar stuff like bombs and the super horn. So to try it out when it first came out, I turned off stuff like shells, bananas, and coins, you know, the standard items for first place, to hopefully see what wacky items I can now get in first place, and would literally only get bombs. Nothing but bombs. So I turned those off and jumped back in, only to get nothing but whatever the next item up was. and then I'd rinse and repeat until I was literally only getting the items you're likely to get in second and third. It was as if there was a queue of items you can get in the topmost positions that I'd turn off, then only get whatever was up next, and repeat. No suddenly getting the wacky items. And obviously, this was really damn disappointing, as it didn't have what I'd assume would be the desired effect of being able to customize items. It was basically exactly the same, except being even more limiting on what items you'd get, completely defeating the purpose of what you'd think the appeal of custom items would be. So fast forward till now, where I needed to record some gameplay and also affirm this so I could talk about it, and I don't know if there'd been an update of some kind that tweaked how things work. I haven't looked into it if there's been any updates or anything. Maybe the last time I was just getting unlucky, but coming back to it now, things felt slightly different. So for starters, I turned off the standard first place items, save for the super horn, single bananas, shells and coins, and hopped into a race. And it seemed to be exactly what I'd experienced before, nothing but lots and lots of bombs. It felt like I was getting the super horn more frequently than before, but for the most part, nothing but bombs. So then I took the natural next step and turned off bombs and super horns, and here's where things got a little more interesting. Rather than what it felt like was happening before, things actually did get a bit more varied. We got this very interesting double whammy of a bullet bill in blooper while in first place, which I did not expect at all, followed by triple green shells and a boomerang flower, and it was starting to seem like, yeah, either I got very unlucky before, or Nintendo had actually tinkered with things and fixed custom items. But then I started to notice more patterns. It seemed that that bullet bill might have been some kind of freak accident or something that I'd somehow enabled to happen with a very low chance, because triple shells, boomerang flowers, and bloopers became something of a theme for this race. Still far more varied than the last race, but still not exactly what we're looking for. Next, I took a slightly different strategy, purely just to see how this would impact the other items that would show off, and turned off single mushrooms and both variants of triple shells. And this was honestly a pretty decent improvement. This time, boomerang flowers, mushrooms, triple bananas, and oddly enough, stars and bullet bills became the flavour of the day up in first place. Finally, this is more along the lines of what we're looking for, but there was definitely more testing to do. I decided to keep it simple and just turn off the boomerang flowers I was seeing a lot of in the last race. Daisy got a bullet bill in first place, good for her, I'm not mad at all. I nabbed me triple mushrooms, a star, triple bananas, and a fire flower in second place, not bad. And when it came to me being in first, I was seeing a good variety, bullet bills, triple bananas, bloopers, more bullet bills, fire flowers, piranha plants, stars. This is much closer to what I was hoping we'd be able to achieve with custom items. The only problem here is how many of the lower level items I had to turn off just to achieve this, having had to ditch like half the item roster, which is a massive shame. What this needed to truly become fully customizable items was not just being able to turn certain items off, but being able to change and design for yourself which items can appear in certain positions. Either being able to change them yourself or turn off items being tied to certain positions entirely. That would be a real game changer and make the items truly customizable. Imagine getting one item box in first place and only getting a green shell, but then suddenly getting a bullet bill. Or being all the way down in 12th, having gotten a couple of stars, but then, oh, you get just sat with a coin or green shell. Great. That would be wonderful to shake up the chaos of Mario Kart, but we should be used to Nintendo thinking they're too good for fun by this point. But then I remembered frantic items. The name frantic always sounded like it would hold what I'm after, but I remember trying it a lot back in the day on Mario Kart Wii and noticing literally no difference, so I just kind of left it alone since then. But I decided to try it out on a race here to see if it's closer to what I'm looking for. So I hopped into a race with frantic items on to have a look, and well, when I was stuck in positions 4th to 2nd, I didn't really notice much of a difference, mostly just the standard stuff. And upon getting up to 1st, coins, bananas, more coins, shells, literally exactly the same as usual. Frantic items does nothing. What is frantic items even supposed to do? Let me check. Oh, well, that makes sense, I guess. It's just kinda lame. I don't know, maybe it's my fault for expecting something out of custom items that it wasn't intended to be, maybe that's on me, but come on, we really need options to dial back the limits on what items you get in what place to really crank the chaos up to 11. And again, maybe I'm wrong for this, but I really thought that's what this would be. I'm glad this option is here, and I'm glad we can kind of do that, but it's still super restricting, which is still a big shame. I decided to push things a little bit further and just go into a game with literally only the most powerful and wacky items turned on, the ones you see here, and well, it was fun. You know, stars and bullet bills and fireflowers and bloopers and golden mushrooms up in first place, but that's still not what you want. You still want the weaker, lamer items in the mix too to get more variety and more challenge. But whatever, like I say, it's still cool that you can do this in the game now, provided you have the booster course pass. I next pushed it even further, turning off the weaker of these items, boos and fireflowers, and more of the same. Super powerful items in first place, lighting everyone up, and I actually do recommend playing with your friends like this, especially on Baby Park. It's absolute mayhem. It's still just a little bit lame when literally everyone else is also getting the exact same heavy hitting items that you are. I decided to round things off with an idea I had that finally might emulate what I'm going for here, giving everyone access to just the Crazy 8. Basically every item in one and... Huh? Wait, hold on. Give me a Crazy 8. There we... Wait, hold on. Is my game bugged? Is Nintendo fully not letting me just give everyone a Crazy 8? Wait, you have to include a mushroom too? Why? Right, if you're watching this, please test this for me too, because I need to know if my game's bugged. Why does it force you to have a mushroom as well if you just try to pick a Crazy 8? I wasted valuable time of my life that I won't get back trying to select literally every other item by itself, and the game was perfectly fine with that, no issues. The game lets me have every other item on its own just fine, but when you try and do just a Crazy 8, nope, nada, sorry, gotta have a mushroom too. Why? Why does Nintendo hate fun? Why do they want to deprive me of this one oddly specific thing I'm trying to do? Like, oh yeah, you can customize the items you have access to in-game now. Unless you want to do it in this one specific way that we don't like. Sorry. And it sucks because you can guess exactly what happened when I hopped into a race like this and was up in first place. Literally just mushrooms. Nothing but mushrooms. What is the point? I mean, I guess it's a fun idea being stuck up in first place, only being able to get mushrooms and everyone behind you has access to literally every other item in the arsenal. Like, I guess that's a pretty fun idea. But if I want to do that, I can just turn on the Crazy 8 and the mushrooms for myself. Why force me to do that? Again, it has no problem with me having just the most powerful items on their own, like bullet bills and stars. Those are fine. Just stars and nothing but stars, perfectly fine. And you know what? It's fucking insane. I love it. I can have literally just bullet bills, which is an absolute fever dream. Getting 2 item boxes at a time is essential to winning. And it's fine with what's actually now my new personal favorite, nothing but lightning bolts. It's hilarious. It's funny because if you actually get up to first quickly and you get the item before everyone else use it and then keep that up, you make it physically impossible for anyone else to retain and use their own lightning bolts, so you just get ridiculously far ahead. Unless, of course, another racer manages to get a strike of their own in before you can use any lightning bolts, causing you to then lose yours, and if they can then chain that up, they can just drag you right back. It's a really fun way to play, actually. I recommend doing this one with friends, especially if everyone cracks open some beers or ciders and you stop and take a drink every time you get struck. I've genuinely discovered something here. But yeah, custom items. It's a weird beast. You can do some really cool things with it, like the stuff I just mentioned, but if you want to set yourself up a game where everyone in every place is able to get some super wacky items, unless you turn off basically all the not so wacky items, you're just not gonna get that. Which is a shame, since I would have thought that's the whole appeal of this. It kind of misses the point in that regard. It's still a very welcome addition that I'm glad is around now, but since you can't really customize the placement of items, it just ends up being kind of disappointing to me. I'd highly encourage all of you to run your own experiments with turning different items off to see how they change up the gameplay, and letting me know how it goes in the comments below. It'd be very interesting, and let me know if you come up with any cool games and modes from it, like my lightning bolt drinking challenge, and definitely let me know if you try that. And I think I've rambled on about custom items enough. I'll get on to what you're most likely here to discuss with me in the first place, the tracks. So, let's see what you got, Wave 3. Starting things off with the Rock Cup, and the first up is Tour London Loop. Look, as a Brit, and especially one who's been to London heaps of times, I'm happy to see it represented, but other than that, I mean, it's another Tour City track. It's a solid enough one though, thankfully. The track is decently designed and can be moderately fun to go through. The main thing it has going for it is that some of the corners can be perilous due to the chain chomps that are there. And then to expand on this, on the final lap, the chain chomps are actually released from their chains, so I guess they're now just chomps, which can definitely catch you off guard if you're not expecting this. But beyond that, you know how these tracks go by now, they're really nothing special. The main thing that gets me is the fact that chain chomps are the gimmick they pulled out for the London-based track, of all things. Meaning that either Nintendo just couldn't think of anything thematically relevant enough to do for a London track, or that they've just confirmed that chain chomps are canonically British. But yeah, on the whole, just another kind of lame city track from Tour, but one of the more solid ones so far. Next is one that I've wanted to see given the Mario Kart 8 treatment for the long time, and while it's obviously nothing on the level of Ribbon Road, I'm actually quite happy with how GBA Boo Lake turned out. Like the other Super Circuit tracks I've seen so far, it's really nothing amazing, but I'm happy enough with the presentation and the addition of anti-gravity and underwater sections to give it a new flair while staying true to the original with few tweaks to the actual track layout. And it's also actually added a lake. The original kind of missed a trick there. It's sad to lose the part at the beginning with the dash pads that you can chain together for more speed and a higher jump, although I know this game's mechanics wouldn't really allow for that. And also the part near the end where you're using ramps to jump over gaps in the floor, or trying to weave around the gaps, but it's cool that the bridge from the original is still here, but has collapsed and can still be accessed as a shortcut at just the right time. That's a nice touch. So all things considered, solid GBA track. Now, there's something you need to know about me before we talk about this third track. I'm something of a Mario Kart 7 hater. I found its selection of Nitro tracks mid as fuck, and its glorified tech demo of the glide mechanic 3DS Alpine Pass was boring in Mario Kart 7, and it's boring now. It boasts one cave with some good turns, I guess, a lame gliding section that just feels empty and dull. Again, this shit and this shit alone is all the track really exists for. Like, seriously, it's such a weird choice to bring back. Oh, and a hill with falling rocks that are genuinely piss easy to avoid. I know talking about this one has been relatively short, but I just don't have much to work with here. Like I say, mid as fuck then, and mid as fuck now. Next. Wait, this is next? Wii Maple Treeway?
Delicious. Finally. Some good fucking
tracks.
And now on to the next cup. So basically, alright, I'm kidding. I can say more about it than that. Maple Treeway, another Wii banger. Man, Mario Kart Wii just did not miss with its track design, did it? Fun fact, back in the day when a 10-year-old George was spending day in and day out training at Mario Kart for the first time on Wii, I actually didn't give Maple Treeway its fair dues. I knew it was a great track, but there were a lot of ones in the game I just liked more. Nowadays I've woken up, and even though it's not my #1 favourite from Wii, I can acknowledge that it is peak track design. I mean, it's another one where the course has gone basically unchanged as it doesn't need to be. It's got some of the most creative track design in the history of the series that uses the forest theme to its full advantage, driving across winding tree branches and zooming around the treetops. There really hasn't been anything like it before or since. It's a shame to lose the rope bridge that flaps around so you can trick off it, and that it doesn't look like its usual gorgeous self due to the lackluster visuals that come with being a tour port. It's another one that I really wish had been in the base game because it just works for Mario Kart 8 anyway, but it also would have looked beautiful. But yeah, incredible track, but let's be real, you knew that already.
You know what? Forget this. Fornicate. This stupid. Fretful. Gay.
Let's move on to the Moon Cup, shall we? So, are you getting sick of me describing these tour editions as yet another pretty boring city track yet? By the way, Tour Berlin Byways is yet another pretty boring city track. I'd maybe put it slightly above Sydney Sprint, as the track can be slightly more out there with the terrain you drive on, with going on paths and downstairs, and as well as roads that can sometimes be filled with cars that aren't the easiest or hardest thing in the world to avoid. And having more divergent paths, even if they're a bit short and don't really lead to anything special or add too much. And those womps are an interesting addition, as they can shake the ground when they drop and you can trick off of them when they're down. And I guess the part where other racers are driving perpendicular to you that lasts like a microsecond is cool. And there's nothing else to it. Sorry, Berlin. I've been to you. You're a cool-ass city, but a cool-ass city does not a great Mario Kart track make. Thanks for building some of the karts for us, though. For track number 2, I'm just going to say straight up that I love me some DS Peach Gardens. Loved it in DS, loved it on Wii, and I love it here. However, this version has me a little conflicted, as while it's still a great DS track, there are some very minor layout tweaks that are tiny, but I'm not too happy about. For example, the first couple of square flower beds in the original, you could pull off sharp drifts to cut ahead of them instead of taking the full turn, which was always fun to pull off even if it only did save you a tiny scrap of time, and that isn't really an option anymore, and I just don't know why you'd remove that. There's also this circular part of the track in the original with the 3 hedges, and hey, it kind of looks like a Wii wheel. But now it's just been replaced with a bog standard circular bit of track with a piranha plant in the middle. It's very minor stuff, like I say, but far less interesting. However, and this is a big however, the fact that the route changes on the final lap to have you going down the track backwards with a long glider section over part of the track is really cool. This really took me by surprise the first time I played it, and made me wish more of these returning tracks experimented with this new feature from Tour to inject some new life into them. But anyways, Peach Gardens is still a great track that's super fun and a great new addition, that goes without saying. I'm just ever so slightly frustrated with some small minor decisions, but they don't ruin the track at all, not even close. Up next is this wave's obligatory not-so-original track, which yes is just what I'm going to keep calling these Tour tracks that for some reason don't say Tour on the selection screen. And because Wave 3 came out in December 2022, it's a Christmas one. I wonder if Christmas 2020 was still as depressing here as it was elsewhere. Did the Mushroom Kingdom ever get COVID? Did we ever see the stats? So, Merry Mountain is a delightful Christmas-themed track with very solid, comfy vibes and a very fun track layout with the theme of climbing all the way up and racing back down the mountain being decently exciting. It has some fun with ramps and the speed bollard things that you may miss or struggle to see if you're playing as PT fucking Piranha. It's not super special beyond that, but it's pretty exciting and fast-paced and frantic, and its nice comfy vibes surprisingly don't clash with that. Not much else to say beyond that really, it's just very solid. And to cap off Wave 3, I've already mentioned me not really having much love for Mario Kart 7, and I don't know how likely that is to get my Mario Kart fan card revoked, but here's something that I know definitely will. I always thought the 3DS Rainbow Road was overrated. But, I can see why people love it so much. Not gonna lie, for the longest time for me, the track design honestly just felt kinda lazy and haphazardly thrown together, like different things just kinda being put into places, with elements of past Rainbow Roads just being tossed in, like Rainbow Road's greatest hits. Like, as an example of shit just kind of being chucked all over the place, we've got the odd Mushroom Gorge style bouncy mushroom that's just kind of floating there because the track needs to have some stuff going on. Or a spinny tube thing with boosts. Cool, I guess. And quote-unquote driving on Saturn's rings isn't anywhere near as cool as it sounds. This doesn't look like that. It looks like it's made of plastic. Or wood. And I don't know if this is just me, but in both versions, even on 150cc, it also feels oddly slow for a Rainbow Road. Most other Rainbow Roads still feel really fast-paced, even when you aren't constantly hitting dash panels, but whenever I do on this, it feels like a godsend, because it's like, finally, a sense of speed. But, despite all that, it's still a very fun track that lends a lot of variety and certainly isn't unmemorable. It's not my favourite, but I can 100% understand its reputation, and it's still great to have it here. I'm never bored while playing it, it's not one I ever want to skip, or one that I groan at when it gets picked. Like, I need to make that clear. It's still a great track that's really fun to race on, I just don't think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread like others seem to. There's a couple to a few Rainbow Roads I'd take over this any day. The Wii one, Mario Kart 8's one, the Mario Kart 8 versions of the SNES and N64 ones, all being tracks I prefer. My favourite aspect is honestly the look of the Rainbow Road itself. I love it. This sort of shimmering rainbow glass stuff that glows neon blue at the edges. Gorgeous. Love it a lot. So yeah, those are my thoughts on 3DS Rainbow Road. And there we have it. Wave 3. We're halfway through this thing. Another solid entry with Wave 3. It definitely stands out from the others so far for introducing custom items, but even so, like the other waves we've had so far, it's solid, but that's all I can really say. The tracks have been a huge mix of bangers, stinkers, and stuff that's just kinda mid, and the more Tour City tracks we go through, the more it's really starting to feel like they're bogging this thing down and taking slots away from iconic legacy tracks that are far more deserving of being brought back in a HD console Mario Kart. And as you heard in my whole ass tangent about it, the custom items, while a really good new feature that I'm sure we're all surprised wasn't implemented sooner, leaves a lot to be desired in my opinion. Now that we're at the halfway point, I'd be curious to know from anyone watching this, if you were following the booster course pass from the beginning and played each new wave for yourself as it came out, how were you feeling by the DLC at this time, by the halfway point? If you were really digging it and happy with it so far and excited to see where it will go, or if everything we've gotten by this point wasn't really impressing you and you were starting to lose interest, or however you were feeling. Please do let me know in the comments if you fancy it. I'm really interested to see how everyone else was feeling by this point. And why should we lose steam now? Let's just head right on in to Wave 4. Actually, no. Before we go into the tracks for Wave 4, we've got us another slight detour. Not as deep a one as my detour into the custom items, but for this wave, we got us our first new playable character. We've only got one to start with, and it's Birdo. Now, I'm not sure how to go about reviewing the addition of a new character, but I'll just say, about fucking time. Yeah, so Birdo first appeared in Double Dash as a partner for Yoshi, and was later in Wii in the same weight class as Yoshi, and I have no idea why it's taken her until now to reappear in a mainline Mario Kart. The original roster for 8 was notoriously lacking, and even up until the booster course pass, people had their problems with it, and I mean, if you really needed to fill out this roster, rather than just soulless clones of other characters with different costumes or colours, I don't know why you wouldn't just take advantage of having a character that's easy to place in the same sort of weight class as Yoshi that's basically Yoshi adjacent. I really don't know why you wouldn't. Quite frankly, she should have either been in the game anyway, or been added in the original DLCs on Wii U, but whatever, she's here, she has different colours to choose from, just like Yoshi and Shy Guy, and yeah, it's deserved and long overdue. Glad to have her here. Birdo being playable easily earns the GeorgeIsLost seal of approval. And, yeah, we all knew that segment was going to be short, but hey, who cares, right? On to the tracks. So, starting out Wave 4's Fruit Cup tracks with Tour Amsterdam Drift. A tour track, set in Amsterdam, with drifting. Insert weed or shroom joke. And we've had some tour tracks that are super mid, some that are pretty decent, and Amsterdam Drift is just okay. It does some pretty interesting things, like the spots with trams to avoid, a decently long underwater section, which is new for one of these, and quite unexpected when I first played it, and some areas that are quite pretty, like the area with the windmills and the Monty Moles whose holes you can trick off of, and if you know me, you know that I'm very partial to doing tricks with people's holes. And the very, very pretty field of flowers, so the track definitely does lend some variety compared to a chunk of the tour tracks we've seen so far. But the thing is, in a game where a lot of the best track design features lightning fast driving, flying, anti-graving, underwater, through crazy turns and loops and imaginative creative set pieces in all kinds of fantastical and whimsical environments, or making fantastical feeling environments out of places like fucking airports or nightclubs, these tour tracks just feel so whatever. And they have me wondering at this point if they were ever really a good fit for Mario Kart in the first place. Fun fact, a few years ago I remember imagining a Mario Kart style racing game with tracks based on real world cities and attractions with a world tour theme and thinking about how cool that would be. But then we got Mario Kart Tour, and then we got these tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and I'm realizing that, yeah, I really wasn't cooking as much as I thought I was. Not bad, but a mid-track on the whole. On to the next one then, I guess. GBA Riverside Park is next, and just like with Boo Lake, I was very pleasantly surprised with this one. It feels very solid and surprisingly dynamic for such a tight-knit course that feels not completely, but very unchanged from its flat Super Circuit counterpart. The new cave segment where you race to the top of the waterfall and burst out through it to start the next lap is very cool, the running piranha plants are a very welcome obstacle to dodge, and the whole thing is actually quite nice visually. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but just like with Boo Lake, I'm very happy with how this remake turned out. It's no Ribbon Road, of course, but if you want yourself a simple, quick track with some tight turns, close quarter action, decent obstacles, and cool vibes, Riverside Park does a solid job, a nice upgrade to the original. For this next one, I feel like I'm going to come across as having a lot of Mario Kart Wii bias, but hey, blame the game for having such a goated track selection, because DK Snowboard Cross, or DK Summit, I don't know, that one's more concise, but it just doesn't sound as cool, you know? Is just as fucking awesomely fun as it was back in the day. There's very good reason as to why a lot of these Wii tracks are virtually unchanged. They just did not need to be. And I'm over the moon to have this one here. I've always thought ever since Mario Kart 8 originally came out that this track would gel super well with the game's new mechanics, and while it doesn't really do anything to experiment with the anti-gravity mechanic, I'm kind of glad it didn't in retrospect. because you really don't need to fix what isn't broken, and the track still fits this game and its mechanics remarkably well. Super fun, lots of variety, the extreme sports snowboarding theme is nailed perfectly with using the half pipes and ramps to pull off trick after trick after trick and getting all them speed boosts, still being endlessly satisfying and still feeling like a rip-roaring high-octane blast the moment you're shot out of the cannon. This thing is perfect. And just to top it all off, I'm glad we were able to keep the crowd cheering when you trick off the half pipes too. Perfect. No notes. And to round off the Fruit Cup, our next not-so-original track, Yoshi's Island. And man, this thing is just something else. The main appeal here is that this thing looks stellar. The translation of the original SNES Yoshi's Island game's art style to modern 3D graphics was done seamlessly and looks incredible. And there's so many little Easter eggs and nods hidden here, like the various creatures and enemies off in the background, sometimes on the track itself, and things like the floating question mark cloud things that I shamelessly don't know the names of, that you can hit during this glider section to make an alternate route appear, and I'm never able to, I always miss. But really, the visual aesthetic and little details here are breathtaking. I was constantly getting distracted the first few times I played this thing. However, the track design itself, while quite fun and dynamic in places, isn't actually all that much to write home about. Again, the main appeal here is the visuals. When I originally began drafting the script, I wrote that this was the best of these tracks we've had so far, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not 100% sure if I'd rank this over Ninja Hideaway, as that has both great visuals and great track design on its side. Whereas here, the visual details do a lot of the heavy lifting to make this thing feel more chaotic than it actually is. But those visuals alone do still help to make it a great track to race on, I can't deny that. This thing is real good, a very solid new tour track. So, the Fruit Cup was a solid addition. One tour track that wasn't the worst or best we've had, but I don't mind having it here at all. Another very solid GBA remake that's faithful yet a great upgrade. Another flawless Wii entry, and a visually stunning and fun new track. Not a bad cup, actually a pretty good one. As for whether the Boomerang Cup will keep the same momentum for this wave, let's find out. So, I'm feeling really weird going into the Boomerang Cup, because we've got a tour track that I can just unequivocally say is good. Yeah, Tour Bangkok Rush has actually genuinely impressed me. Not only is it quite visually impressive, its track design is just good. There are some great set pieces like this river section with the boats you can trick off and the market canopies you can bounce off that lend to a very dynamic track with an actual good sense of speed, which a lot of the tour tracks have been lacking. The more laid back sections like the trip through the market and the city street are very visually nice and are just the right length to not overstay their welcome. And this thing really takes advantage of changing routes between laps. This thing twists and turns all over the shop and ensures you're almost always travelling through something new, and what sections you do revisit don't overstay their welcome either and enhance it rather than feeling repetitive. Yeah, there's not much else to say other than that. This was just good. I'm very surprised by this one. Next up is... there's the mid-track of the cup. How I missed you. DS Mario Circuit is another 3DS Toad Circuit for me, in a sense that it's just another bland track that feels like such a waste of a slot. The track design isn't bad, there's some satisfying turns to maximize your drifts on, but outside of that, the track design is just really bland and uninteresting. I really feel like I'm talking about a tour track here, but no, this is a DS track, one of my favourite Mario Kart games, and yet I always forget this one is even a thing that exists. There have been some welcome changes, like the piranha plant spitting fireballs at you now, and part of the track has been turned into a forest section that on the final track features a wiggler, but neither of those are crazy hard to avoid anyway. But hey, I'd rather take that than no changes at all, because yeah, this one's just really mid, and I have no idea why you'd go back to this one outside of just nostalgia for Mario Kart DS. Plus, this game features many better DS tracks for that purpose anyway, but oh well, is what it is. Moving on. And oh, we are moving on to GCN Waluigi Stadium. Now we're talking. So I remember back in the day watching people's videos about Mario Kart games and their retro tracks, and I remember so many people saying that the Wii version of this track ruined it by adding the half pipes. And I don't know if people still stick by this take, as it has always baffled me. I couldn't disagree more. The half pipes for me just helped an already great track feel even more action-packed and lended well to the dirt bike stadium theme this thing is clearly going for. Plus there's extra strategic value there. Do you just follow the track, or do you risk taking the half pipes to gain speed and maybe an extra goodie like an item box or a coin in this game's case, while putting yourself at risk of being in a bad spot if you get hit by an item? I don't know, for me the half pipes were a great addition to the Wii Wii version, and this version doubles down on the Wii version's design philosophy in the best possible way. The track's core design is intact, yet now we've got these added extra layers that you can only access using the half pipe, so you've got to go out of your way to get to them, yet they often reap rewards like extra speed boosts or extra item boxes or coins, and for me, this once again perfectly adds to the track in the exact same way. This is another one, just like Snowboard Cross for me, where I always felt this one would gel with 8 Deluxe's mechanics perfectly, and once again I'm glad it's here because I got proven right. The half pipes are still great for building up speed, yet can still trick you up like I say, and the added layers are just icing on the cake. I don't care what anyone says, each new version of this track became the new definitive version. This track only got better, this version being the best. It's so fun, so action-packed, such a thrill ride, and now actually has you thinking about what kind of strategy to take, offering the player some choice. Phenomenal addition to the roster, I'll be coming back to this one a lot, and already great track, getting better and better with each revamp.
You massive gay shit! Fuck off!
Now, the last one here is weird, because it's the first time we've had 2 Tour City tracks in one cup. Now, normally that would have me groaning, if it weren't for the fact that the next track is Tour Singapore Speedway, quite possibly the best tour track in the entire DLC. This thing is really damn good. Man, flashback to what I was saying during Amsterdam Drift. I'm really eating my words real quick now, huh? It's easily my favourite tour track so far. It's visually stunning, has great music, and took a lot of creative chances with its layout. We've got a cannon in a tour track, giving way to the great set piece that is these little Goombas in a rooftop pool. Look at them there, just vibing. We've got glider sections, one of which gives way to an alternate path. I'm usually too nervous to go for it. Gorgeous colourful set piece after gorgeous colourful set piece after gorgeous colourful set piece, and just very well done and thought out track design across the board that can make for some great action and satisfying turns. This track just really understood the assignment when it comes to converting a real-world city into a great Mario Kart track, having you zip around all over the place in the sky and across buildings with very unique features, plus narrow sections, fans and fountains that blow you upwards, conveyor belts, and more. Seriously, there's a lot of tracks I love way more, and this thing isn't making it into the very top tier anytime soon, but Singapore Speedway really surprised me with how fun it is, and I know for a fact that I am not the only one who wanted to go to Singapore for myself after playing this track. And that's wave 4. I'm starting to run out of ways to talk about each wave individually, not that they had much different things to say about them anyway, but wave 4's been very solid. It was weird to only have one new character when the rest will have multiple. I feel like they could have distributed these across the waves better, maybe each wave should have had a couple. But in terms of the tracks this time, as usual I wasn't a fan of absolutely everything, but looking at the ranking, those bottom tiers are pretty empty, with those top tiers being filled out pretty evenly. I'm actually pretty enthusiastic about most of what's here. And for the sake of building suspense for dramatic effect, with another 8 tracks and more new characters, will Wave 5 keep up the same momentum? Well, I didn't want to be cliche and say let's find out again, but I kind of have to move on in order for us to see, so... And once again for this wave, we've got new playable characters and multiple this time, so here's our first new character, Lightning Round. Basically, this video is already crazy long, so I'm gonna just try and get through him quickly. First up, PT Piranha. You saw footage of me playing as him previously, and he has a massive fuck-off head, which can be kind of annoying for seeing anything, but I don't care. You can't not love this guy. He was an awesome wildcard in Double Dash along with King Boo, and while I get why, it's a shame King Boo got to come back, yet PT didn't till now. But whatever, I love him. I think he's awesome, and I'm glad he's here. Next, Wiggler. Not one I'm super jazzed to play as, but I can see his appeal. I know people like him, and it's cool to have some rep for the wacky choices Mario Kart 7 made with its unlockable characters. Also happy to have him. I keep saying that like it's not going to take a lot for me to be actively angry to have a character. If all the new characters were shit like Red Silver Mario or Green Bronze Luigi or whatever, that'd be a different story. And last of all, Kamek, which excited me the most. For those who don't know, Kamek was originally meant to be playable all the way back in Mario Kart 64, but was scrapped and has not been seen in a game since, so it's a real nice surprise for Kamek to finally step out into the spotlight for Mario Kart in a really cool callback to the game's history. Overall, I love this new set of characters. Great additions, love them a lot, happy with all of them, and I don't know what they were thinking back in the day with their Metal Marios and Pink Gold Peaches. This is how you fill out a character roster. And from characters to tracks, let's have a look at what Wave 5 shall bring. Tour Athens Dash is first up, and geez, I don't know who didn't let the tour tracks cook until now, but this is another good one. It's a much more varied and unique feeling city track that uses the theme of ancient Greek architecture to its advantage, with old ruins being a key component of the track's layout, having you go up and down and around and across all these old structures. We ain't just driving on regular ass roads here. We're taking a trip through history, and it makes the design of the track itself feel a lot more creative and less conventional, and it's such a simple yet effective choice. There's a lot of highlights that stick in my mind, like the first big jump into the ruins, drifting around an ancient stadium and driving up another one later. The flight into a cave, racing up the steps, doing loads of tricks, and there being a lot of choice of which routes take up them to find speed boosts, and the sheer amount of ramps to trick off and half pipes to gain speed and help you take corners, and the glide into a little pleasant trip through this town area. This thing was just really well thought out, and that one simple choice to focus on the ruins made for a much different experience here compared to the rest of the tour offerings, one of the coolest city tracks so far. Next up is GCN Daisy Cruiser, a personal favourite of mine, and yet another one where not much needed changing as the track is still a joy. The track is very simple in terms of its design. You go around the edge of a cruise ship, go into it for a short bit during some twisty-turny tight-knit action, and then back out and around again, and despite being simple, it's very effective, and everything about the track nails the theme of a cruise ship perfectly. Aside from it being a super well-designed track that's always fun to play on, I'm glad we did keep the small changes made to it in the Mario Kart 7 version, with you being able to drive through the pool, plus the short optional underwater section with clams to trick off or get items from. The track is just super versatile, with additions only ever seeming to either work very well with it or improve it outright. An obvious highlight that's always been a mainstay is the section with the tables and item boxes rocking back and forth, which now has a lot of extra charm with the added elements of characters sitting at them, and they still make for fun obstacles. Plus how tight-knit a lot of the action is in the narrower, more closed-off sections. But yeah, I love this one. Once again, simple but effective. Always a joy to race on, and I'm so happy it's here. Wii Moonview Highway now, and since this is another well-renowned Wii track, you probably think I'm about to give this thing a complete and total tongue bath, but here's the thing. It looks gorgeous, and I'm glad to have it, but it feels neutered in comparison to the original. The cars scattered about are a lot less of a worry and feel much less consequential, and I think this is because there's just far less of them. I think, anyway. Getting hit by them or crashing into a bomb car feels like so much less of a threat than the original, and while it's still a well-designed track, this alone really takes away from the track's core appeal. It's lost its sense of panic and chaos, and again, it's still a great track. Weaving in and out of the cars that are there is still satisfying. It's still fun to weave back and forth across the wide section to get as many boosts as possible, or be drifting across it to try and get the best drift boost while avoiding the other cars. But yeah, a track that I should be absolutely ecstatic to play on again, like most of these Wii tracks, just doesn't have me anywhere near as enthused as I should be, because the chaos of the original just isn't here. And I get why it's been done like this. These cups are just collections of various courses. They don't go in ascending difficulty order or anything, so they can't really sway too much towards being really easy or hard compared to what else is in them, but it's just a shame that this classic course has been left feeling so much less fun than the original. It's still good though, at least. Finally, our next not-so-original tour track is Squeaky Clean Sprint, which is such a simple concept, but they ran with it to its full potential, making it another great not-so-original track. This thing is an example of something Mario Kart can do so well, taking such a simple concept, whether it's an airport or nightclub or cruise ship, and just taking the concept as far as possible to make it feel like a fantastical environment. There's so many neat track design touches, such as driving through the bathtub filled with water and then going down the plug hole and finding a wedding ring. Flying over the toilet that can sometimes spurt water up at you to help you take an alternate path if you choose to. Just keep your mouth closed during that though, that's how you get sepsis, seriously. Someone should tell American school bullies that swirlies are seriously fucking dangerous, deadly even. I could honestly go on and on listing all these various features that make what would be a simple square-shaped track design feel infinitely more dynamic and creative, not even talking about all the tiny things like the small bathroom-related elements that basically build the track. This is just a really fun course to race on, made of so many elements ranging from super creative to weird and outright humorous, and I really like it. Again, it's not quite Ninja Hideaway, but it's probably my second favourite of these tracks after that. It's just super creative, that's all there is to it. And now, on to the Cherry Cup. Tour Los Angeles Laps. Mid. Lame. Back to the city tracks feeling bland and dull. It's like the track attempts to have a decent amount of variety in the environment with the pier, the beach, the city, the flight through the stadium, and the industrial area, but not enough exciting creative decisions in the track layout itself. It doesn't do anything interesting with the ideas or take them anywhere fruitful. Especially after playing Singapore Speedway, which really did a lot with its track layout, it's going to be a bit of an uphill battle for these tracks to stand out, and I get that, but I honestly feel like even if I did see this one earlier, I'd be saying the exact same thing. Plus, it's not like LA is devoid of stuff to do with the track, but the only thing about this that really screams LA is the pier and the beach, but that's it. And what we get instead to fill the rest of the gaps is an oil rigging field. Like, imagine being from LA, being excited to see your city repped in Mario Kart, only to find that what Nintendo associates your city with is a symbol of our planet's imminent death and decay. Although, to be fair, this is another track where I've actually been to the city it's based on, and honestly, I can vouch, it does suck. But that doesn't mean the Mario Kart track should too, goddammit. Mid. Next, please. So, GBA Sunset Wilds. I've talked about the remakes of the flat tracks from Super Mario Kart and Mario Kart Super Circuit, and how I've been quite happy with some of them, such as Boo Lake and Riverside Park, yet sadly this is much more of a Mario Circuit 3 than a Boo Lake. It's sadly another disappointing Super Circuit remake. They just didn't do anything with this. It's still almost as flat with a really boring layout that just has me feel nothing while racing it. The dancing Shy Guy miners are a decent addition that aren't the easiest thing in the world to avoid, and avoiding the mud can be kind of fun, I guess, in the sense of maybe releasing a microgram of dopamine, but there's literally nothing here other than that. Another example of the GBA tracks being boring because they just couldn't get the Ribbon Road treatment. I'm also going to address the same thing that everyone's talking about, the fact that despite some of these other tracks' small extra features being present, the one thing this track does, the titular sunset where it gets darker with each lap until the sun sets in the final lap like in the original, just not being here. I get there's probably a good reason, but I don't care. It's such a simple thing to implement and should have been able to have been done, and just, I don't know, again, a lot of people probably expected me to be angry at this one and kind of go into it, but it just makes me feel nothing at all. At least with Mario Circuit 3, there were things about the layout that I could appreciate, but I don't even have that here. Not just the worst track in this cup, not just the worst track in this wave, but possibly the worst in the whole DLC so far. Nothing of note here at all. But now we've got Wii Koopa Cape, another classic from Wii that's easily a 10 out of 10 banger. Or is it? Largely, it's still the same great track, but it is unfortunately lacking in areas, and unlike Peach Gardens, where what it lacked was very minor and other aspects made up for it, this one lacks something major, and there isn't much of a silver lining except for everything else about the track that made it great thankfully still being intact. So rather than it being the original track -1 + 2 like Peach Gardens, it's more like the original track -2 + 0. This version takes cues from the Mario Kart 7 version, similarly still being a great track but lacking something key. Namely, the underwater pipe section is still nerfed and doesn't have the spinning electric bars that shrink you lightning bolt style if you touch them, along with a stream of water that you can stay driving in to increase your speed. Unlike the Mario Kart 7 version, which didn't really try to replace it with anything, here they've added half pipes and the spinning speed boost anti-grav bollard things, so now this segment is still fun and there's some actual decent action gameplay to be found here. But this just cannot hold a candle to those features in this section in the original. As a track on the whole, it's still going to rank quite highly because literally everything else that made the track great is still here, with its amazing design and dynamic features such as the track with flowing water that you can try and stay in to increase your speed, or deviate from for risks and rewards. And all the ramps and half pipes to match the chaotic feel of the music, but the original was just so much better, with this section in particular just feeling boring and empty by comparison. But hey, it is what it is, and either way, I'm still just happy to be able to play this nostalgic Wii banger again on a modern console. Next, I was a little worried after Los Angeles laps about having 2 tour tracks in one cup again, but not to worry. Tour Vancouver Velocity is thankfully another of the good Tour City tracks. Not quite on the level of Bangkok or Singapore, but there's a lot to like here, starting on the narrow winding bridge. Finally using anti-grav, by the way, which is a first for these tour tracks, I'm pretty sure. That actually makes for a fun and thrilling, tight and twisty ride, and then ending up in the city, which is fun and looks gorgeous. And some pleasant surprises to be found, like finding yourself driving through an ice hockey rink with a different way out each time. Like I say, it doesn't do anything that mind-blowing, but those features are enough for another fun and creative attempt at a city course from Tour. Not a bad one at all. Again, I like Athens, Bangkok and Singapore better, but this is a pretty solid one. And we're almost at the home stretch, guys, second to last wave. There's a decent amount of stuff to like here, but unlike the last wave, there's a couple of undeniable stinkers for me, and although that's not too dissimilar to previous waves, it will definitely make it interesting when it comes to doing the final ranking of waves or cups or whatever. Which am I going to do? I don't know, you'll have to see, won't you? Which is why I personally don't see any need to waste any more time. Wave 5 about as solid as an entry as most of the others have been, and as for Wave 6, let's just dive right in and take a look at it so we can wrap this thing up. And just before we dive into the Wave 6 tracks, we've got us our second and our last new character lightning round. This really would have been more effective if there was more than 2 of them. First up, Pauline, an inspired choice for Mario Kart. She's defo one that we could have seen before, since she was technically one of the first Mario characters we ever saw all the way back in Donkey Kong. Though after that, she did only really feature in the Mario vs Donkey Kong series, which was more of a side thing than anything else. But she majorly rose to prominence in Super Mario Odyssey, and since that's the latest 3D Mario game and she was such an iconic part of that game, the choice to have her here just makes sense. And I love the little touches, like how when she does tricks, she sometimes sings parts of Jump Up Superstar, her song from the game, which is an absolute bop, by the way, if you've never listened to it in full. Great character, awesome new choice. Next is Funky Kong, and it is about damn time we saw this absolute Chad again. He's become such an iconic part of Mario Kart Wii with just how many people pick him when playing the game, especially in the speedrunning community. He's basically synonymous with the game at this point, so to function as basically a callback to Wii, he's great. It's awesome to have him back, and it honestly feels like he never left. He should just be in every game going forward, quite frankly. Next is Diddy Kong, which I'm a little more indifferent to having around, but definitely not going to complain. He's made appearances before, such as a partner for Donkey Kong in Double Dash, and was playable in Wii, so he's just a good choice to help fill out the character roster a bit more, and hey, if we're making references to Donkey Kong Country, can't have the donk without the did, am I right? And last of all, Peachette. I mean, it's not another pink gold peach, but why? Why do this? I know in terms of the game she's from, she's still technically not the same as Peach. She's Toadette with a specific item, but it's still basically Peach, just with an alt costume. I'll never understand why we're still taking up entire character slots with what could just be an alt look for an existing character. Granted, they do try to differentiate her a little bit. She's got a slightly different voice that sounds like a mix of Peach and Toadette, and has some unique lines, just like the other not-so-original characters, but geez, what an underwhelming final inclusion. However, will the tracks be underwhelming? Are you getting sick of these cliche segues? I'm getting sick of writing them, so I'm glad we're almost done with them. It's Wave 6 track time. Kicking off the final wave with the Acorn Cup, which starts us with Tour Rome Avanti, and while it's not quite on the same level as some of the earlier Tour tracks I praised, it's definitely one of the better city tracks. It's quite varied in places and features some very fun twists and turns that go all over the place, which is all I feel I really compliment Mario Kart tracks on anymore. It can be a little confusing thanks to that, but once you've learned the track in more detail, it's not really an issue. A lot of the track kind of suffers from what Paris Promenade does, which is looking a bit samey a lot of the time, but there's some great set pieces here, such as the driving up the side of the Colosseum near the start, and then later entering it again to find chain chomps chewing up the floor, which doesn't add too much admittedly, but it's just a cool visual. Plus a gliding section over a really pretty part of the city, and that's what I can mainly give the track. It's quite pretty going around all these streets and plazas, almost to its detriment, really. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the music or something, but this rarely feels like a race. It kind of lacks a sense of speed and often feels more like a leisurely drive through the city, which could be a good or bad thing depending on who you ask. But yeah, not a great city track, but definitely at least an above average one. I'm not going to groan at this one getting picked on multiplayer or anything. But if you want that sense of speed and action, you can find that shit right here in this next one. GCN DK Mountain is iconic for a reason. It's incredibly dynamic and fast-paced, and to this day, the whole concept of being shot to the top of the mountain followed by a high-octane race down to the bottom is still an amazing idea. It's executed so well in a way that has definitely attempted to be matched since, but in my opinion, never quite successfully. Everything about the race back down is perfectly done. From all the opportunities to trick, to all the drifting around sharp, perilous turns and the falling rocks, this definitely feels like you're darting down a literal volcano. This is also another one similar to Waluigi Stadium, where people's videos ranking retro tracks back in the day had some weird complaints about the Wii version. I distinctly remember people saying that the added ramps and half-pipes ruined this track and getting legitimately angry about it, and again, I just can't see how you'd come to that conclusion, and I couldn't disagree more. It adds to the bumpiness of the ride down, adds to the frantic action to really make the way back down feel perilous. At least this time the ramps are integrated into the mountain itself this time, if this was really something that tipped you off before, for some reason. But anyway, DK Mountain is just a fantastically designed track that's just as much fun now as it was in every iteration. So glad to have it in modern Mario Kart. So here's another Wii one in the form of Wii Daisy Circuit, and once again you're probably expecting me to worship the ground this track walks on, but not really. Not because this version butchers a great original or anything, the original is just not my favourite from Wii. I will say it's a nice relaxing chill track and it's well designed for what it is, but it's just never a Wii track I'd jump at having back. It's nothing too special, but it's pleasant enough, but we also kinda already have a more relaxed feeling track in the form of Rome Avanti. The clashing in feel from track to track here is just a little bit off. On the whole, Daisy Circuit, it's good, it's alright. It's not a Wii one I'd have personally brought back, but I'm not complaining. So we're on to our last not-so-original track with Piranha Plant Cove. This one takes some cues from the city tracks, with it actually changing routes throughout, meaning we get some variety here, or at least attempted variety. I'm not sure what the consensus is on this one, but I don't know, it just didn't enthuse me all that much. It felt quite slow and static in places, and I think the main appeal here is more the setting and the fact that it's very visually interesting, but other than that, it doesn't really do anything all that special. Something like Dolphin Shoals is a much better example of a very interesting, fun, and varied water track. This one's just kind of a much less interesting version of that. Its layout is far more interesting than something like Sky High Sunday, but that one's theme is a lot more interesting. I don't know, I can concede that this one's competently designed, but it's just really not all that memorable, unfortunately. I do get a kick out of all the toads and stuff above water watching you though. Like, you do know those plants mere meters away will literally eat you, right? This is not a safe environment for you. So that's the Acorn Cup, our second to last one, and it's a shame because while DK Mountain is a great standout, there's unfortunately a lot of mid here. I mean, alright, not outright mid, but definitely nothing mind-blowing. If we're gonna end on a high here, then the finale, the Spiny Cup, is gonna need to pull out all the stops. So, let's see if it does. Starting with Tour Madrid Drive, and I feel like a lot of people rate this one, but honestly for me, it's mostly uninteresting if it weren't for two great set pieces. The plaza with the Wiggler that wakes up on the final lap, it's fun to drift through, and the Wiggler's a pretty compelling obstacle, I guess. And the football stadium you drive through on the final lap, that makes for a pleasant surprise, especially with the crowd cheering as you drive through the goal. I also find the drive through the art gallery quite pretty, even if it's not very eventful. I will say, even though this didn't jump out at me that much other than that, I do appreciate the music. The Spanish-style guitar music defo nails the vibe, and the course looks quite nice, but other than that, not much here that excites me. Sorry, Spaniards. So, 3DS Rosalina's Ice World. So, like I said, I found a lot of Mario Kart 7's Nitro tracks to be very mid. There's some great ones in there, most of which made it into Mario Kart 8 initially, but then you've got stuff like Alpine Pass, or Cheap Cheap Lagoon, Daisy Hills, and more that just felt so bland and empty and unmemorable. And for the longest time, Rosalina's Ice World stood out to me as one of them, another mostly pretty mid 3DS track, but it's at least a little bit better than I gave it credit for initially. One area having an optional underwater section does a lot for it. The odd varying path here and there and that long drift around a big open chasm is quite satisfying. It's also quite visually nice when you're outside with all the Mario Galaxy imagery. It's quite pretty, although once you're inside the cave, it's just kind of bland and dull again. Overall, it's nothing amazing and still pretty mid, it's just a little bit less mid than I initially remembered. It also has a shit name, like Rosalina's Ice World. Okay. So this cup's off to a pretty mid start, but not to worry. We are ending things off with a hell of a double whammy. SNES Bowser Castle 3. Finally. I'm surprised more people haven't made a bigger deal about the first SNES Bowser Castle revival. Basically, for those who don't know, this is one of the themes from Super Mario Kart that never made a comeback. And I always felt that with a thoughtful enough update, they could have a lot of potential, especially number 3, and this is a fantastic update to that track's design. Despite being quite simple layout-wise, it feels very frantic and fast, and while there's very few, if any, bad Bowser Castle tracks in Mario Kart, this nails something key, and that is actually feeling like a Mario platforming level as a racetrack. This feels like you're platforming. The updates they've made here are stellar. The section with all these paths made up of different platforms is great, although looking at the original, it looks as though what would suit it better is if the platforms were floating around in the lava like the Mario Kart DS Bowser's Castle. I think if they'd kept the philosophy of designing this section they used here, but also added that to keep it more faithful to the original, then that could have been cool, although I'm still very happy with the interpretation that we got here. And also in this section, making the walls that formerly just separated the paths into walls that you can actually drive on and trick off of was a stroke of genius. This thing was just a near perfect upgrade to this old flat track. They knocked this remake absolutely out of the park, and I surprisingly find myself loving picking this one. It's just really fun. It's just a perfect example of these small, simple, formally flat tracks still feeling perfectly action-packed if done well. The updated version of the music here also goes insanely hard. I fucking love it. Yeah, this one is great, but of course, it's not the finale. We've got one more track. And Nintendo's pick for the final track of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass DLC was quite possibly the best final track I could have ever possibly asked for. Wii Rainbow Road. My absolute favourite Rainbow Road of all time, the childhood nightmare of many a Mario Kart player, including myself, with once again next to nothing change because it did not need to be. This thing is fucking perfect. It's the opposite of the 3DS one, which lacked a sense of speed to me, and yet in this it always feels like you're rocketing down the track at 1,000,000 miles an hour. From all the perilous twists and turns to the many opportunities for drifts and tricks with all the half pipes, the way the track twists and winds and feels like a roller coaster the whole way through. It also looks absolutely gorgeous, plus that fantastic music that honestly has me feeling personally insulted whenever there's a lightning strike because it stops me from hearing it in its full undistorted glory. This track is just a rip-roaring thrill ride the whole way through, never slowing down, never letting up, always dangerous and always exhilarating. It's just perfect. It's on the level of Waluigi Pinball for me, which during the process of making this I had ranked at the top for a while, but to prematurely spoil my ranking, this has dethroned it. This is genuinely my favourite track here, bar none. It's not as difficult as the Wii original. I don't think the track's been widened or anything. I just think that the way Mario Kart 8 plays just complements it better in the sense that avoiding falling is easier, but honestly, that's okay to me because it still maintains the feel of the original and its danger perfectly. I could not have asked for a better way to cap off this DLC, so thank you, Nintendo. You may not have nailed every choice in this DLC, but you gave it the perfect finale, and I am overjoyed that this track is here. Fantastic way to end this thing off. And so, that's Wave 6, and I'll just get the Wave 6 ranking out of the way and get it up on screen for you there, so you can have a little peruse. There we go. And with that, I have reviewed the entirety of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass DLC. Every track, in every cup, in every wave. Every new feature, all one of them, and every new character. What an undertaking this has been, months in the making, and here we are, having reached the end. Or have we? Oh, you thought it ended there? There is still so much to do. We gotta rank these bitches. You may be thinking, but George, you already did. I've been looking at the tier list. Oh, my sweet dear innocent child. I have come this far. I am not gonna be lazy about this. I mean a ranking. That's not a ranking. This is a ranking. We are going from what I believe to be the worst course in the DLC, one by one, all the way up to the best. Starting at the bottom, not at the F tier since I didn't put anything in there, actually at the D tier, and we have at the bottom at number 48, from worst to best, GBA Sunset Wilds, 3DS Toad Circuit, GBA Snowland, Tour Sydney Sprint, Tour Los Angeles Laps, Tour Berlin Byways. Moving up to the C tier with Tour Paris Promenade, Tour Tokyo Blur, 3DS Alpine Pass, Tour Amsterdam Drift, DS Mario Circuit, Tour Madrid Drive, Piranha Plant Cove, Tour London Loop, SNES Mario Circuit 3, Tour New York Minute, and up to the B tier with GBA Sky Garden, 3DS Rosalina's Ice World, Sky High Sunday, Merry Mountain, Tour Rome Avanti, Tour Vancouver Velocity, Wii Daisy Circuit, GBA Riverside Park, GBA Boo Lake, Tour Bangkok Rush, Tour Athens Dash. Up to the A tier now with Yoshi's Island, Squeaky Clean Sprint, N64 Choco Mountain, Wii Moonview Highway, SNES Bowser Castle 3, Tour Singapore Speedway, 3DS Rainbow Road, DS Shroom Ridge, N64 Calamari Desert. And finally, up to the S tier with Wii Maple Treeway, Ninja Hideaway, DS Peach Gardens, GCN Daisy Cruiser, Wii Cooper Cape, GCN Waluigi Stadium, GCN DK Mountain, and our final top 5, Wii DK Snowboard Cross, Wii Coconut Mall, Wii Mushroom Gorge, DS Waluigi Pinball, and at number 1, my absolute favourite track in the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass, Wii Rainbow Road. And that, my friends, is all of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass. But wait, there's more. See, I sunk so much time into this, so much, such valuable time, sacrificing precious moments with friends and family to put together the perfect ranking and review video. I'd already sacrificed too much sanity to end things there. I knew we had to go further. So I ask of you, what's the best cup here? Well, I had to find out. I knew I was already much too far gone to put together a regular old ranking based on opinion, and I didn't get a 5 in GCSE maths for nothing, so I could only put this ranking together based on fact with the power of averages. But what kind of average, you may ask? Well, I'ma tell you. A median average would be pointless, a modal average wouldn't paint an average picture, and nobody gives a shit about range. The only average of use here was a mean one. So what I decided to do first was give each course a score based on their tier. 0 points for F tier, but there's nothing in there anyway, 1 point for D, 2 points for C, 3 for B, 4 for A, and 5 for S. And since there's 4 tracks per cup and 5 is the highest a course can get, give each cup a score out of 20. And I've got those up on screen for you there. But wait, there's more! Look at these. They don't paint the most varied picture, and a lot of these are the same. I knew that we could get more in-depth. I knew that we could get more precise, more accurate. I've played so much Mario Kart, I am losing my mind. So I once again give each course an individual score based on their position in the worst to best ranking in ascending order. So number 48 at the bottom gets 1 point, 47 with 2 points, 46 with 3 points, etc, etc, all the way up to number 1 with 48 points. Then plugged all these scores into their respective cups and divided them by 4, rounded to whole numbers because decimals are for cockwombles, although there were a couple where the rounded numbers were the same, so I had to resort to decimals for those, and a couple where even those were the same, so I just had to pick between them, but we can ignore that. To find that mean average, and from this, we can get a more accurate ranking of the cups based on fact and maths. The maths doesn't lie. And according to the maths, and my opinion for one of them, because a decimal number ended up being the same, from the weakest to the strongest cup we have the Cherry Cup with 17, the Propeller Cup with 19, the Golden Dash Cup with 21, the Rock Cup with 21 but more, the Acorn Cup with 25, the Lucky Cat Cup with 25 but better, the Moon Cup with 25 but more, the Fruit Cup with 27, the Spiny Cup with 28, the Boomerang Cup with 28 but more, and the Turnip Cup with 29. And the best, according to the maths, that I'll have almost certainly made a couple of mistakes in, but we're going for it, the Feather Cup with 32. I don't know if I would have ranked these the same way I did if I based them purely on how I feel about them, but I was already way too far gone to choose that shit hard, plus it probably would have been inconsistent with my ranking of the courses, so this is how we've done it. And that, at last, is the entirety of the Booster Course Pass DLC reviewed and ranked. But wait, there's more. No, I'm joking. That's it. That's all there is. I guess I could also use these averages to give the Booster Course Pass an overall grade, although that doesn't take into account stuff like the characters and custom items. But we'll do it anyway. The median average gives us a B grade, the modal average gives us an S, so I'll average that and give the Booster Course Pass an A grade overall. And you know what? That feels appropriate. There may have been a few tracks here and there that I'm not too happy with, but hey, we've been stuck with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with no promise of a new proper Mario Kart anytime soon since 2017, so to get given basically an entire new game's worth of tracks over the span of a year was very, very welcome, and there's a hell of a lot of tracks here that I'm so damn glad to have in this game. And it's funny, the bottom 3 tiers are actually the least populated. The list is actually pretty top heavy, so overall this feels like a success. Plus the new characters, the ability to turn certain items you'd rather not race with on and off, even if it wasn't exactly what I'd want out of such a feature, I can still say that on the whole the Booster Course Pass is very, very good. Whether it's worth the price, for me personally it was, but for you personally, that's up for you to decide. I just know that I'm very happy with it, and it squeezed a good amount of new life out of this game that, while still universally loved and played by groups of buddies on couches the world over, definitely needed it, and I can say happily that the Booster Course Pass is good. And so wraps this big old project I've undertaken, easily the biggest video by far I've worked on so far. I began working on this around the release of Wave 5 and was originally going to release it in 2 parts, one with Waves 1 to 3 and then Waves 4 to 6 after the final release, but I headed off to university in September and that dominated a lot of my time. Hopefully going forth I'll be able to strike a decent balance, but when it came to newly adjusting to it, that needed all of my time and energy, hence why not only this took so long, but also my uploads in general have taken so long, because I've been prepping to start uni since last September. The past year has had me very preoccupied, with plenty of personal stuff as well as that. But I hope this was worth the wait, and I know that if you've seen my upload schedule, then you know what I'm like with uploads anyway, so we'll see how things are going forth. I can only try my best. And for those who've been waiting for Doctor Who content, especially now that we've seen the 60th anniversary specials and the 15th Doctor's first story, that'll be my main focus next. I'll try to get on that as soon as I can, but for now though, I really hope you enjoyed this dive into the Booster Course Pass, and I hope you'll stick around to see what I do next. If you did, please do let me know, and if you're feeling it, then support this video by leaving a like and a comment. That really helps us small channels get seen more, as like this is the biggest project I've done so far, so it would really mean a lot if as many people saw it as possible. But for now, thank you so much for watching, all you beautiful people, however many or few of you there may be, and I will see you next time. Cheers!